The entire ballroom held its breath. I was in the darkest corner of the ballroom, trying to merge with the shadows as I did every night of my life. My dress was gray, simple, old, wine stains still visible on the fabric that should have been sky blue before Seduce conveniently tripped with her glass. I was invisible. That was how it should be. That was how I survived. But then he entered. King Merida, the Steel Wolf, the conqueror who unified 3 kingdoms under his banner before the age of 30. Stories about him circulated like sweet poison, each more terrifying than the last. They said he ripped out throats with his teeth, that his leaden eyes could see lies as others saw color, that he never, ever smiled, and he was walking toward me. No, impossible. I looked around, searching for who he was truly seeking. Seduce was to the left, radiant in her golden gown, every strand of blonde hair perfectly arranged. The other debutantes formed a glittering line of silks and jewels, each more dazzling than the last. But the king walked past all of them without a glance. His lead gray eyes were fixed on me. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my temples. His every step echoed on the polished marble, and the silence that followed him was absolute. No one dared to breathe. No one dared to move. He stopped before me, too tall, too imposing, dressed in impeccable black and silver, without a single unnecessary adornment. He smelled of cold steel, clean linen, and pine. And when he spoke, his voice was grave, like distant thunder. You, the girl who knows where the northern border lies. His eyes swept over my face with an intensity that made me forget how to breathe. I have a question. Behind him, I could see Seduce. Her face had lost all color. Her mouth was agape in silent shock. And I, the library mouse she had sworn would never be noticed, was being chosen by the king. If you want to know how I arrived at that moment, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Come with me. This story is mine, but now it is yours too. To understand, you need to know who I was before, and what it cost me to get to that ballroom. My name is Merida, and I learned to be invisible before I learned to read. Not by choice, by survival. When my mother died, I was 6 years old. I remember her scent, parchment and wild roses, and her hands guiding mine over the first letters of the alphabet. She said my mind was a treasure, one I should never hide. 6 months after her funeral, my father brought Lady Vespera home, an elegant widow with a daughter my age, and a smile that never reached her eyes. Seduce was everything I was not, blonde where I was coppery, delicate where I was clumsy, social where I preferred quiet corners and dusty books, and my father, lost in his grief and enchanted by his new wife, simply forgot about me. Not literally. I still lived in the house, still ate at the table, still had a room, but gradually, the etiquette lessons stopped. The new dresses went to Seduce, the private tutors taught only her, and I became the shadow no one saw. Perhaps I should have resented it. Perhaps a stronger person would have fought back. But I was a child, and children adapt. I found refuge in the library my mother had loved. I taught myself what the tutors no longer taught me, and I discovered something no one expected. My mind never forgot. Not just a good memory. Perfect. Photographic. Once I saw something. A page, a face, a map. It was engraved forever. I could close my eyes and see every word of every book I had ever read, every column of numbers from every ledger I had copied. It was my secret weapon. And I kept it hidden, because Vespera noticed too much. And when she noticed something valuable, she took it for Seduce. The years passed. I grew up in the shadows, copying documents for my father at night because he needed help with commercial records, but would never publicly admit that his invisible daughter was more capable than his official daughter. My hands became permanently stained with ink. My room smelled of old paper and candle wax. And I watched. I watched my father make increasingly obscure deals. I saw names I shouldn't recognize appear in his ledgers. I memorized caravan routes, sums of money, agreements whispered in corridors when they thought no one was listening. I was invisible, and invisibility had its advantages. The ball of the clans was announced 3 moons in advance. It was the most important event of the decade. King Merida, recently crowned after his father's mysterious death, summoned all the lords and their families to renew oaths of loyalty. They said he was searching for traitors. They said heads would roll before dawn. They also said, in more frivolous whispers, that he was seeking a wife. Seruthi went wild with preparation. Dresses were ordered from the capital. Jewels were polished. Dance instructors came and went, each one more frustrated than the last with their willful student. I didn't expect to go. All daughters of the lords must attend, Vespera announced a week before the ball, her voice sour as spoiled milk. That includes you, Merida. We cannot give the impression that we are hiding family members. It wasn't affection. It was fear of appearing suspicious. My dress was chosen without consulting me. Sky blue, pretty in its way, though clearly inferior to the 3 Seruthi owned for the same night. But it was mine. And for one stupid, hopeful moment, I imagined that maybe, just maybe, someone would see me. The day of the ball dawned clear and cold. I spent the morning in the library, as always. New maps had arrived from the north, detailing the disputed borders with the mountain clans. I studied every line, every marking, every note in red ink indicating conflict points. It was just curiosity. I told myself it was just curiosity, but my mind registered everything. In the afternoon, I began to prepare. The blue dress hung in the wardrobe like a promise. I braided my coppery hair more carefully than usual, though still tightly, still trying not to draw attention. I applied a minimal touch of color to my lips. I was ready, and then Seruthi walked in. Oh, dear sister. Her voice was poisoned honey. She carried a goblet of red wine, her blue eyes gleaming with that casual cruelty I knew so well. Let me see how you look. I should have run. I should have shielded my dress with my body. But years of invisibility had taught me not to react, not to give her the satisfaction of seeing my fear. She stumbled. Conveniently. Elegantly. The goblet flew from her hand like a bird of blood, and the wine hit my dress in a perfect arc of destruction. Dark stains blossomed on the blue fabric. My stomach sank. Oh no. Seruthi's voice was a parody of concern. How clumsy I am. Merida, darling, I'm so sorry. You'll have to find something else to wear. Something else. As if I had options. As if she didn't know exactly what she was doing. Vespera appeared at the door, drawn by the noise. Her eyes assessed the scene in a second. What a shame, she said coldly. Merida, there is an old dress in the attic. Gray velvet. It was my grandmother's. It will have to suffice. The dress was from the generation before. Antiquated cut. Fabric faded by time. Poorly disguised smell of mothballs. When I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I saw exactly what Seruthi wanted everyone to see. A servant. A shadow. No one. The carriage ride to the castle was silent. Seruthi radiated satisfaction in her golden gown. Vespera checked her makeup in a hand mirror. My father looked out the window, lost in thoughts that probably involved the shady business I pretended not to know about. And I sat in the corner, invisible as always, trying not to think about how humiliating it would be to enter that ballroom. The royal castle was made of light. I had read about it, of course. I knew the walls were of white marble from the northern quarries. I knew the chandeliers held 1,000 candles each. I knew the main hall could hold 500 people. But knowing was not the same as seeing. The splendor stole my breath. Everything was clean, polished, perfect. The stones gleamed. The crystals sparkled. Even the air seemed purer, scented with fresh flowers and beeswax. And the people, lords in velvet robes, ladies in silks and brocades. Jewels worth more than my father's fortune glittered on necks and fingers. Among them, my gray dress was a visual offense. Seruthi cast me one last look of triumph before disappearing into the crowd, immediately surrounded by suitors and flatterers. Vespera and my father went to greet political allies, and I did what I always did. I sought the darkest corner and merged with the shadows. It was there that she found me. You are Lord Ashwood's daughter, aren't you? The voice belonged to an elderly woman, white hair pulled into an elegant bun, sharp eyes despite the wrinkles. She wore simple black without jewels, but carried an authority that needed no adornment. I am. My voice came out firmer than I expected. Merida Ashwood, the one who spends her nights in the library. I froze. How did you— I am archivist Morna. I manage the Royal Library. I saw you studying the border maps this morning when I visited your father's archives. She tilted her head, studying me. You made corrections. In the left margin. The trade route that was wrong. My heart stopped. I had done it almost without thinking, annoyed by the obvious mistake. I hadn't imagined anyone would notice. I apologize if— Don't apologize. Morna smiled, and it was a smile of approval. Your corrections were right, and now those maps are on the Royal Council's table. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. The king saw them. He wants to know who the anonymous genius was, who saved his troops from an ambush due to the wrong route. Before I could process her words, a silence fell over the hall. Conversations died. The music stopped. All heads turned to the main entrance, and King Mordair entered. He was exactly as the stories described, and nothing like them at the same time. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the restrained grace of a predator who doesn't need to prove anything. Impeccable black tunic with subtle silver embroidery. No crown, no excess. Just pure power, radiating from him like heat from a forge. He ignored the line of debutantes. He ignored the lords who bowed. He ignored Serethi, who had strategically positioned herself in his path with her most dazzling smile. His lead gray eyes swept the hall like a general examining a battlefield, and stopped on me. Morna had disappeared. I was alone in the corner, my gray dress looking even more pathetic under that piercing gaze. And then he started walking, toward me. Don't lift your eyes, Serethi had told me earlier, her breath warm in my ear. You're not his type. He would never look at a library mouse like you, but he was looking. And when he stopped before me, so close I could smell steel and pine, his deep voice made my entire world tremble. You, the girl who knows where the northern border lies. His eyes pierced mine. I have a question. The entire ballroom held its breath, and I, for the first time in my life, did not want to be invisible. My mouth went dry. 500 people watched me. 500 pairs of eyes fixed on the girl in the gray dress who dared to occupy the king's attention. I could feel Serethi's hostility crossing the hall like an invisible blade. I could imagine Vespera's fury, my father's shock. But all of that was background noise, because King Mordair was waiting for my answer. The northern border, my voice came out surprisingly firm, runs parallel to the frozen river for 40 leagues, then veers southeast where it meets the Vale Mountains. There are 3 viable passes, but only one allows heavy troop transit. Unfortunately, the map your council is using marks that pass 3 leagues east of its actual position. Absolute silence. Mordair's eyes narrowed. Not in anger, I realized with a flicker of hope, but in interest. And how do you know this? Because I studied the original maps of the Deloran expedition 12 years ago. They were copied incorrectly by a hasty cartographer. The error propagated into every subsequent version. I couldn't stop now. The words flowed like dammed water finally finding escape. I also noticed that the trade route marked for your winter supplies passes through Karth Defile, which freezes 3 weeks earlier than your planners seem to believe. If your caravans follow that path after the full moon, they will be trapped. Mordair was silent for a long moment. I could see the gears turning behind those leaden eyes, calculating, assessing. Then he did something no one expected. He smiled. It wasn't a large or warm smile. It was small, restrained, almost predatory, but it was genuine. And according to the whispers around me, it was extremely rare. Come with me. It was not a request. He turned and walked toward the balcony doors, clearly expecting me to follow him. For a second I was paralyzed. Then my feet began to move, and I crossed the hall under the weight of 500 incredulous stares. I saw Serethi as I passed. Her face was a mask of poorly contained fury. Her lips moved in something I couldn't hear, but which was certainly not a compliment. I didn't care. The balcony was an immediate relief. The cold night air washed my face, clearing the suffocating heat of the hall. Below us, the castle gardens stretched out in perfect geometric patterns, lit by floating lanterns. Mordair leaned on the marble railing, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he pulled a parchment from inside his tunic. This was intercepted 3 days ago, he said. handing me the document. From one of my lords to an unknown contact. It is coded. My codemasters have failed to decipher it in 72 hours. I took the parchment with hands that trembled slightly. The surface was covered with seemingly random symbols, numbers intertwined with letters in patterns that made no immediate sense. But my mind was already working. "May I have light?" Merida raised his hand. A servant I hadn't noticed appeared with a lantern, positioning it to illuminate the parchment. The symbols danced before my eyes. I let them flow, not trying to force meaning, just observing. Patterns began to emerge. Repetitions, frequencies. "It's a double substitution cipher," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "But it doesn't use the standard alphabet. It uses the harvest records." "What?" "The numbers correspond to pages in the kingdom's annual harvest registry. Each symbol is a coordinate. Page, line, word." I closed my eyes, accessing the perfect memory I kept hidden. I had copied that registry for my father 2 winters ago. Every page was still etched in my mind. The first sequence would be, "The pact will be honored when the moon." No, wait. I opened my eyes, redoing the calculation. "The pact will be honored when the wolf falls." Merida straightened, all feigned laziness gone from his posture. "Continue." I worked through the rest of the parchment in silence, translating symbol by symbol, building a message that made my blood run cold with every word revealed. "The pact will be honored when the wolf falls. The poison is prepared. The traitor on the council will open the gates. We await the signal of the man of gold." I raised my eyes to meet his. There is more, but it is fragmented. References to dates and locations that I would need more context to interpret. Merida took the parchment from my hands, his fingers brushing mine for a second. The touch was brief, but electric. "In seconds," he said slowly, "you deciphered what my masters failed to in days. I have a good memory." The understatement came out of habit. "No, you have an extraordinary mind." He tucked the parchment away and turned to face me directly. "And I need minds like that. Not pretty faces and empty heads." I didn't know how to respond. No one had ever talked about my mind as if it were something valuable. "You are more valuable than that entire hall combined," Merida continued, his voice dropping. "And I suspect you know it, but have been taught to hide." My heart beat irregularly. Hiding is surviving. Hiding is wasting. He took a step toward me, and I resisted the urge to retreat. "Tomorrow there will be a council dinner. Matters of war and alliances will be discussed. You will come." What? "Not as an escort." His lips curled into that rare smile again. "As an observer. I want your eyes on my lords. I want to know what you see that they think to hide." It was madness. A library maid, practically, sitting beside lords and generals. Vespera would never allow it. My father would never agree. But Merida was not asking their permission. He was asking me. "Yes." The word escaped before I could censor myself. "I will go." "Good." He stepped back, returning his attention to the gardens below. "Now return to the hall before inconvenient rumors begin." "And Merida?" My name on his lips did something strange to my stomach. "Yes, Majesty. The gray dress does not do justice to your mind. I will arrange something more suitable." I returned to the hall in a daze. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Seruthi shot me poisonous looks whenever our paths crossed. Vespera tried to corner me twice, demanding to know what the king wanted. But I escaped with vague evasions. My father didn't even look for me, lost in his own conspiracies. And I stayed in my corner, feigning invisibility, while my mind was buzzing. The king wanted me. Not my body, not my lineage, not any of the things men usually wanted from women. He wanted my mind, my skill, my gift. It was terrifying. It was intoxicating. The next morning, a messenger arrived at our residence. Vespera opened the box he carried, expecting something for Sereth. Her face when she saw the card with my name was something I would forever store in my photographic memory. The dress was midnight blue, elegant but simple cut, without excesses or unnecessary adornments. The fabric, however, was of the highest quality, soft as water beneath my fingers. Along with it, there was a smaller box. Inside, writing materials. But not just any materials. Goose quills from the eastern plains, the softest for prolonged writing. Royal quality ink, the kind that neither smeared nor faded. Parchment so thin it felt like silk. And a note in precise masculine calligraphy. For the mind that corrected my maps. Use well. M. Sarithe snatched the note from my hands before I could react. For the mind, she read aloud, her tone dripping with disdain. What did you do, Merida? Offered services other than reading? Sarithe, Vespera reprimanded, but there was no real indignation in her voice. It's a valid question, Mother. Why would the king send gifts to our library mouse? She turned to me, her blue eyes icy. You can't truly believe he is interested. Men like him toy with women like you. They use and discard. Perhaps. My voice came out calmer than I felt. Or perhaps he recognizes value where others are too blind to see. The slap came too fast for me to duck. My cheek stung, but I didn't back down. I didn't give her the satisfaction. You will go to the dinner, Vespera said coldly, intervening before Sarithe could attack again. Not because you deserve it, but because refusing a royal invitation would be worse. But make no mistake, Merida. Whatever the king wants from you, it is not what you are dreaming of. People like us do not ascend. We only survive. She was wrong. I had spent my life surviving, hiding, diminishing myself to fit into the shadows assigned to me. But for the first time, someone had looked into those shadows and seen light, and I wasn't going to waste this chance. That night, as I prepared for the council dinner, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The midnight blue dress transformed me, not into another person, but into a version of myself I had hidden for too long. The girl in the mirror had sharp eyes and raised shoulders. She looked like someone capable of sitting among lords and seeing through their lies. She looked like someone the king would choose. I took a deep breath, stored my writing materials in the small bag that came with the dress, and left the room, toward my destiny, toward him. The council chamber was smaller than I expected, not less imposing, just more intimate. A rectangular table of black oak dominated the center, surrounded by high-backed chairs. Silver candelabra hung from the ceiling, their candles casting golden light on scattered maps and stacked documents. It was a room made for secrets, for decisions that changed fates, and I was about to sit in it. A butler guided me to a chair in the corner, next to an elderly man with a white beard and surprisingly young eyes. He wore simple scholar's robes, and when I sat down, he inclined his head in acknowledgement. You must be the young woman who corrected the maps. His voice was melodious, welcoming. I am Sage Orion, the king's counselor. Mordair has spoken highly of you. My heart quickened. I hope I haven't created impossible expectations. On the contrary, Orion smiled, wrinkles deepening around his eyes. He is more excited than I have seen him in years. And believe me, that is saying something. Before I could answer, the main door opened. The lords entered in silent procession. I studied them one by one, my mind registering every detail. Their clothes, their jewels, the way they moved, how they looked at each other, how they avoided looking at each other. Lord Blackwood was the third to enter. I recognized him from my father's records. Tall, gray-haired, an easy smile that didn't match his calculating eyes. He managed the eastern farmlands, responsible for a large part of the kingdom's supplies. Something about him made me clench my hands under the table. The others settled into their seats. A man in discreet armor sat near the door, eyes constantly moving. Beta Cade, I recognized, the chief of the king's personal guard. On the other side, a thin, pale fellow watched everything with serpentine interest. Vance, the master of whispers. I had heard stories about him. Then Mordair entered. The entire room seemed to straighten. Shoulders rose. Side conversations died. He walked to the head of the table with the same predatory grace as the night before, his eyes sweeping the attendees like a general inspecting troops. When his gaze met mine, something warm settled in my chest. It was only a second. Then he sat down, and the council began. The first hours were a lesson in royal politics, border reports, trade disputes, tax and harvest issues. I absorbed everything, my mind cataloging information automatically, cross-referencing data with what I already knew from my father's records. And then Lord Blackwood began to speak. "The Eastern harvest exceeded expectations, Majesty." His voice was confident, smooth. "We have enough surplus to supply the troops throughout the winter, with margin for foreign trade." I frowned. The numbers he cited didn't match. I had memorized the harvest records from 3 years ago, when my father negotiated grain with Blackwood's lands. If I applied standard growth rates and considered this year's climatic conditions, which I knew from other sources had been adverse, it didn't add up. The numbers were inflated by at least 20%. I picked up my quill and a piece of parchment, writing quickly. "Blackwood's numbers are wrong. Actual harvest is 20% lower. He is either hoarding grain or diverting it." I folded the note discreetly. Orion noticed and raised an eyebrow. With a minimal gesture, I passed the paper to him, and he passed it on until it reached Mordare's hands. I saw the moment he read it. His expression did not change. Not a muscle moved. But his eyes briefly lifted, meeting mine, and I saw in them a spark of what might be approval, or the hunt. "Interesting, Lord Blackwood." Mordare's voice smoothly cut into the Lord's explanation. 20% surplus is impressive, considering the late frosts that hit your lands in the spring." Blackwood hesitated. It was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. "The frosts were less severe than initial reports suggested, Majesty." "Were they?" Mordare tapped his fingers on the table. "Because the records I received indicated significant losses in the northern fields of your territory. Fields that, curiously, now appear to have miraculously produced." The silence in the room was suffocating. Blackwood smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps the records are outdated, Majesty. I can provide a full audit if you wish." "Provide it." The word was a command disguised as a suggestion. By the end of the week, the matter was closed, but I could feel the stares. Some curious, others hostile, all trying to understand how the king knew. And in the corner of my vision, I saw Blackwood studying me. He knew, or he suspected. I had made my first enemy. The dinner that followed was a test of nerves. The lords talked in groups, forming and dissolving alliances with every glass of wine. I stayed by Orion's side, observing, cataloging, trying to look less important than I felt. Then Serethe appeared. I didn't know she had been invited, but there she was, in a red dress that left little to the imagination, smiling at every lord who passed. Her smile froze when she saw me. "Merida." She approached, every step a declaration of war. "What a surprise to see you here. At a royal dinner, in a dress you clearly didn't pay for." "Serethe." I kept my voice neutral. "I'm glad you could make it. I always come where there are opportunities." Her eyes swept the room until they found Mordare. "And the greatest opportunity is right there. Too bad you can't compete." She left before I could reply, moving toward the king with the determination of a missile. I should have been worried. I should have felt jealousy or insecurity. But I watched as she approached Mordare, as she flashed her brightest smile and tilted her body suggestively. And I watched as he responded with the same cold courtesy he offered everyone else. She was not a threat. He didn't see her. What surprised me was realizing that he was watching me. Across the hall, over Serethe's head, his leaden eyes were fixed on me. There was something in them I couldn't decipher. Interest, calculation, and maybe, just maybe, something warmer. I looked away first. My heart was beating too fast. Later, when the lords began to disperse, Mordare appeared at my side. "You were useful today." His voice was low, just for me. "Blackwood is nervous. Nervous people make mistakes. He also knows someone exposed him." I replied equally quietly. "He watched me during dessert." "I know. Cade is watching." Mordare turned slightly, his body creating a barrier between me and the rest of the hall. "You are safe here, but I need to know you can protect yourself outside these walls." Before I could ask what he meant, he pulled something from inside his tunic. A dagger. Not just any dagger. The blade was black as obsidian, with silver veins running across its surface like frozen lightning. Volcanic glass, I recognized. Rare, valuable, deadly. This belonged to my mother. Mordare placed the weapon in my hands. The weight was surprising, perfectly balanced, She was a strategist like you. She saw what others did not, and she needed to defend herself against those who feared her vision. I don't know how to use. You will learn. His fingers closed over mine for a moment, warming the cold metal between us. I must leave tomorrow. News from the borders. But I will return, Merida. And when I return, I want you by my side. No longer as an observer, as a counselor. My breath hitched. Counselor? You proved your worth tonight, and I learn quickly. He stepped away, but his gaze lingered. Use the dagger if anyone tries to silence your mind, and know that, wherever I am, you are under my protection. He was gone before I could respond. I stood there, the volcanic glass dagger heavy in my hands, the heat of his touch still burning my fingers. Counselor. Protection. His mother's blade. These were gifts that went beyond political courtesy. They were declarations. And as I tucked the dagger beneath my dress, feeling the cold glass against my skin, I knew everything had changed. I was no longer invisible, and that was as liberating as it was terrifying. Mordair left at dawn. I watched him from my bedroom window, his black horse cutting through the morning mist like a solid shadow. He didn't look back. Kings don't look back, but something in me wished he had. Folly. Useless sentimentality. I returned to the reality that awaited me. Vespera waited for me in the hallway when I went down for breakfast. Her eyes swept over my simple dress, my rigidly braided hair, the ink stains I hadn't managed to completely remove from my fingers. The king has left, she said coldly. Whatever your illusion of importance, it went with him. Return to your books, Merida. That is where you belong. I didn't answer. It wasn't worth it. But when I reached the family library that afternoon, I found the door locked. Orders from the mistress, the servant said, avoiding my eyes. The library is being reorganized. Restricted access. It was punishment. Obvious and petty. Vespera was reminding me of my place. I went up to my room, the volcanic glass dagger hidden beneath my skirt weighing as a reminder. The king had given me a weapon. He had called me a counselor, but he was days away, and I was alone with people who hated me. For 3 days, I survived in the shadows again. I avoided Saritha, who seemed determined to humiliate me at every opportunity. I avoided Vespera, whose looks promised future consequences. I avoided my father, who was more nervous than I had ever seen him, locked in his study with visitors who arrived at night and left before dawn. But I didn't stop watching, and on the 3rd night, my observation yielded unexpected fruit. I couldn't sleep. The moon was full, its silver light streaming through my attic window. I sat on the edge of the bed, thinking of Mordair, wondering where he was, if he was safe, if he thought of me. Then I heard voices. They came from my father's study, 2 floors below. Normally, I wouldn't be able to hear anything from that distance, but the house was silent, and the voices were raised. I crept down the stairs barefoot, stepping on the boards I knew wouldn't creak. Years of invisibility had taught me to move like smoke. The study door was ajar. Assurances that the plan is continuing, my father was saying. His voice trembled. After what happened at the council, Blackwood is paranoid. Blackwood is a coward. The second voice was deeper, more controlled. But he has reason to worry. Someone leaked information to the king. It wasn't me. No one is accusing you. Yet. A pause. But we need to find out who it was, and silence them before they cause more damage. My blood ran cold. Through the crack in the door, I could see 2 silhouettes. My father, hunched over the desk, looking smaller than I knew him, and another man, his back to me, wearing dark, unidentified clothes. The king leaves for the borders tomorrow, the man continued. Our contact in the troops is in position. When Mordair crosses Karth Defile, I know the plan. My father sounded almost nauseous. I don't need the details. You need the details because you are financing the details, Ashwood. Your gold bought the poison. Your trade routes hid the assassins. When the steel wolf falls, you will be as stained with blood as any of us. The world tilted. My own father was plotting to murder the king. I took a step back. The floorboard beneath my foot groaned. The voices stopped. I ran. I climbed the stairs in desperate silence, my heart beating so hard I was sure the whole house could hear. I reached my room, locked the door, and threw myself onto the bed, feigning sleep. Footsteps in the hallway. A pause outside my door. I didn't breathe. After an eternity, the footsteps retreated. But I didn't sleep. I lay there, eyes fixed on the ceiling, my mind spinning in increasingly tight circles. My father was a traitor. Mordair was in danger, and I was the only one who knew. Dawn found me with a plan. It wasn't a good plan. It would probably kill me, but it was the only one I had. I waited until the house was busy with morning tasks. Then I went down to my father's study, which I knew was empty while he had breakfast. The door was locked, but years of nocturnal document copying had taught me how to bypass simple locks. I worked quickly, my photographic memory absorbing every document I found: financial records, coded letters, maps with routes marked in red. Everything confirmed what I had heard. And more, much more. Blackwood was not the only lord involved. There were at least 4 others, their names carefully noted on a list my father kept in a secret drawer. And the man of gold mentioned in the coded message. It was my father, the main financier of the conspiracy. I tucked the most incriminating documents under my skirt, along with the dagger. I needed to leave. I needed to reach someone who could warn Mordair. But when I opened the study door, Vespera was waiting. Going somewhere, Merida? Behind her, 2 servants I didn't recognize blocked the hallway. Big men, armed. I was looking for my father. My voice didn't tremble. Years of invisibility were good for something, after all. I wanted to ask permission to go to the city. A lie. Vespera approached, her serpentine eyes examining my face. You heard something you shouldn't have last night. I thought I imagined that creak, but my husband became too nervous for it to be a coincidence. There was no point in denying it. You don't need to do this, I said, changing tactics. What my father is planning is treason. When the king finds out, the king won't find out. Vespera smiled, and it was the smile of a snake about to strike. Because you won't tell him. Take her to the attic. Lock the door and board up the windows. She stays there until we decide what to do with her. The men advanced. I thought about running. I thought about fighting. But there were 2 of them, armed, and I was a girl with a dagger I barely knew how to use. I let them take me. The attic was my prison. Windows boarded up, as Vespera ordered. Door locked from the outside. Only a single candle to illuminate the dusty space, and even that was taken after a few hours. I was alone, in the dark, with documents that could save a king, but no way to deliver them. For a moment I allowed myself to despair. Then my mind started working. The attic had other exits. I knew this because I had explored every inch of this house in my solitary childhood. There was an opening in the ceiling that led to the roof, used for generations for repairs. Small, but I was small. I waited until nightfall. When the house fell asleep, I moved. I stacked trunks and boxes until I reached the opening. The boards were old. They gave way with some effort. The cold night air hit me like a welcome slap. I crawled across the roof, the volcanic glass dagger cold against my skin. Every creaking tile made my heart stop, but no one came. I reached the edge. The garden was 2 stories below. There was no time for fear. I climbed down the ivy trellis, praying it would bear my weight. Once, twice, the boards gave way beneath my fingers, but I kept going. When my feet touched the ground, I almost cried with relief. I ran. The city was an hour's walk. I didn't know the way to the war fortress where Mordair was, but I knew someone who could help me. Archivist Morna, the woman who had found me at the ball. She worked at the castle. She knew Mordair. She was my only hope. I reached the castle gates at dawn, exhausted, dirty, trembling with cold and fear. The guards looked at me suspiciously. I need to see Archivist Morna. My voice was hoarse. It's urgent. A matter for the king. They laughed. Go home, girl. The castle is no place for... Let her pass. The voice came from behind the guards. Beta Cade emerged from the shadows, his sharp eyes assessing me in a second. You are the girl from the council, the one who corrected the maps. The king is in danger. The words spilled out of me. My father is a traitor. There is an ambush prepared at Karth Defile. I need to... Come with me. Cade was already moving. Now. As I followed him into the castle, a single thought sustained me. Mordair had given me a dagger and asked me to protect my mind. Now I would use that mind to protect his life. Cade took me to the war fortress. It wasn't a short trip. 2 days on horseback, changing mounts at every guard post, sleeping only when absolutely necessary. My body screamed with exhaustion, but my mind allowed no rest. Every hour that passed was an hour. Mordair approached the ambush. The king passed through Karth Defile yesterday, Cade informed me as we rode the last leg. But he received your message in time. He took an alternative route. The relief almost knocked me out of the saddle. Is he safe? He is alive. Cade's face was grim. But there was an attempt. Poison in the water. 2 of his men died. And the king... He hesitated. The king was affected. Not mortally, but he is weak. Weak. The word was strange applied to Mordair. He was steel. He was stone. He was the unwavering force that held the kingdom together. Take me to him. The war fortress was exactly what the name suggested. Thick black stone walls. Watchtowers in every corner. Soldiers in every corridor. Their expressions tense. Their hands never far from their weapons. Cade guided me through a maze of corridors to a door guarded by 4 men. They stepped aside when they saw him, and the door opened. The room was Spartan. A narrow bed. A table covered with maps. A single window letting in the weak light of dusk. And on the bed, paler than I had ever seen him, was Mordair. He was awake, but his eyes had lost some of that steel glint. There was sweat on his forehead, occasional tremors running through his muscles. The healers around him exchanged worried glances. When he saw me, something shifted in his expression. Get out. His voice still carried command, even weakened. All of you, except her. The healers hesitated. Cade gave me a warning look, but nodded and ushered everyone out. The door closed. We were alone. You came. Mordair tried to sit up, but the effort made him falter. I rushed to him, my hands finding his shoulders, gently pushing him back against the pillows. Don't move. My voice was firmer than I felt. You were poisoned. You need rest. Rest. He laughed. A weak, hoarse sound. The kingdom is on fire, and you want me to rest. The kingdom can wait an hour. I sat on the edge of the bed, studying his face. The pallor, the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly. What poison was it? The healers don't know. Something rare. From the eastern lands, they suspect. Eastern lands, where Blackwood had his commercial connections. My mind began to work automatically, accessing everything I knew about Oriental poisons. They were rare, yes, but I had read about them. Master Aldrich, my father's old herbalist, had manuscripts. There is an antidote, I said slowly. Or rather, there is a combination of herbs that can neutralize most poisons from that region. Black valerian root, crescent moon petals, and blue pine essence. But it's complicated to prepare and... Do you know how? I read about the process. Once. I hesitated. My memory is accurate, but I've never tested it in practice. Then test it now. His fingers found mine, cold and shaking, yet surprisingly strong. I trust you, Merida. More than I trust any of these healers who have spent 3 days accomplishing nothing. Those words, that touch, the intensity in his eyes even through the fever. I swallowed hard. I will need access to the apothecary. And time. You have both. I worked through the night. The fortress's apothecary was well equipped, but some of the herbs I needed were rare. I sent soldiers to scour the nearby forest, describing exactly what to look for. While I waited, I prepared what I could, my hands moving with a certainty my mind didn't fully feel. Cade appeared near midnight. The soldiers found the black valerian root. He placed the package on the table. The crescent moon petals were growing on the north slope, just as you said they would be. And the blue pine? 3 leagues south. The men return at dawn. At dawn could be too late. I will go get it. Cade blocked my exit. It is dangerous. The forest is full of... Your king is dying. The words came out sharp, carrying an authority I didn't know I possessed. With every hour that passes, the poison advances. If I don't have that essence by dawn, there will be no king to protect. He studied me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he stepped aside. Take 2 men, and do not die. The king would never forgive me. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows. I moved as fast as the darkness allowed, the 2 soldiers barely keeping up with me. My mind projected the map of the region I had memorized years ago, calculating distances, identifying landmarks. Blue pine grew only in specific areas, where the underground water carried unique minerals. I knew exactly where to look. I found the tree as the moon reached its highest point. It was smaller than I expected, but unmistakable. Needles of a deep, almost black blue, exuding a scent that cleared the mind. Carefully, I extracted the essence I needed, storing it in the vial I had brought. We returned at dawn. Mordair was worse. The tremors had intensified. His skin was gray, almost translucent. The healers whispered in corners, their faces saying what their words dared not. I pushed everyone out. I worked in silence, my hands surprisingly steady as I combined the ingredients in the exact order my memory dictated. The resulting liquid was dark, almost black, with an intense aroma that made my eyes water. I sat on the bed beside Mordair. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. Mordair. I touched his face, feeling the heat of the fever under my fingers. I need you to drink this. His eyes opened. For a moment, they seemed not to recognize me. Then something cleared in his gaze. My strategist. His voice was a whisper. You came. I will always come. I brought the vial to his lips. Now drink. It will taste horrible, but you will survive. He drank. And then we waited. The minutes dragged like hours. I stayed by his side, holding his hand, observing every change in his breathing, every alteration in the color of his skin. Slowly, gradually, the tremors subsided. The pallor began to recede. His breathing deepened. And when the sun fully rose, Mordair opened his eyes with a clarity he hadn't had since I arrived. It worked. My voice came out strangled. It seemed so. He sat up, testing his muscles, assessing his own body with the critical eye of a warrior. Then he turned to me, and there was something in his eyes that made my heart stop. You saved my life. You would have done the same. No. He reached out, touching my face with fingers that had finally stopped shaking. I would have sent soldiers, ordered healers, commanded. But you, his thumb traced the line of my cheek. You came personally, fled your prison, rode for days, entered a dangerous forest at night. For me, for my king. No. He leaned closer, so close I could feel the heat of his body, the scent of pine that now seemed even more intense. For me, Mordair, the man, not the title. I had no answer for that. Or rather, I did. But it was an answer I was terrified to admit. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. I didn't want a queen, Merida. I wanted you. From the moment I saw you correcting my maps in the library, without knowing I was watching, from the moment you looked at me at the ball without fear, only curiosity, from the moment I realized that your mind was the most precious treasure this kingdom had ever produced. Tears stung my eyes. Mordair, I love you. The words were simple, absolute. Not your status, not your lineage, not anything they can take from you. I love the mind that never stops. I love the courage you hide beneath invisibility. I love the woman who crossed a kingdom to save me. When he kissed me, it wasn't with the hunger of a conqueror. It was with the reverence of a man who had finally found his equal. And I, for the first time in my life, stopped being invisible and allowed myself to be seen, completely, irrevocably, his. The winter trial took place 3 weeks later. The great hall was packed. Lords, ladies, counselors, soldiers, all eyes fixed on the throne where Mordair sat, recovered, imposing, his leaden eyes sweeping the crowd with their usual intensity. And beside him, in a chair that had never existed before, was I, not as a prisoner, not as a witness. As the king's official counselor, my position formally announced the week before, causing shockwaves that still reverberated throughout the kingdom. My father was brought in chains. He looked like he had aged decades since the last time I saw him. Shoulders slumped, eyes vacant. Behind him came Blackwood and the other conspiring lords, all equally defeated. And Vespera. And Seduce. My half-sister saw me in the seat of honor, and her face twisted into something between fury and disbelief. She opened her mouth, probably to protest, but the guard silenced her before she could speak. Lord Ashwood. Mordare's voice echoed through the hall. You are accused of high treason, of financing a conspiracy to murder your king, of providing routes and resources to enemies of the realm. How do you plead? My father looked up. For a moment his eyes met mine. I expected to see hatred, resentment, accusation. Instead, I saw something worse. Shame. Guilty majesty. The hall erupted in whispers. Mordare raised his hand, and silence returned. The evidence against you was gathered by your own daughter. He gestured toward me. Merida Ashwood risked her life to expose your treason. She fled house arrest, rode for days to warn me, and saved my life when the poison you financed nearly killed me. My father closed his eyes. A tear rolled down his cheek. I know. His voice was a broken whisper. I know what she did, and I know I don't deserve her as a daughter. The silence that followed was absolute. Mordare rose, descending the steps of the throne. He stopped before my father, looking down at him. For your actions, you should die. The law is clear. He paused. But your daughter requested clemency, and I have learned to trust her judgment. My throat tightened. I had asked yes, not out of love for the man who ignored me all my life, but because I knew carrying his death would be a weight I didn't want. You will live, Mordare continued, but you will be stripped of all titles and properties. You will live the rest of your days in exile, in the northern lands, where the cold will be your only companion. My father nodded, defeated. The other traitors were not so lucky. Blackwood was sentenced to death, his execution scheduled for dawn. The other conspiring lords received varied sentences, according to their level of involvement. And then it was Vespera and Seduce's turn. My stepmother held her head high, defiant until the end. Seduce trembled, all arrogance gone, replaced by pure fear. You did not participate in the conspiracy directly, Mordare said, but you kept Merida a prisoner. You tried to prevent her from saving her king. She's just a servant. Vespera spat the words. A library mouse who doesn't deserve... Silence. The word was a whip. Vespera choked, her face paling. Mordare turned to me. What is your judgment, counselor? All eyes turned to me. I rose from the chair, feeling the weight of the decision. I walked to where Seduce and Vespera knelt, stopping before them. You called me invisible, I said softly. A mouse. Someone who would never be seen. Never be valued. Never be anything. Seduce sobbed. Vespera continued to stare at me with hatred. But I saw you, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I saw the calculated cruelty. I saw the pleasure you took in diminishing me. I saw the emptiness behind the jewels and the expensive dresses. I took a deep breath. I could ask for your heads. I would have that right, but that would be becoming what you are. And I refuse. I turned back to Mordare. Exile. For both of them. May they live the rest of their lives in the obscurity they fear so much. May they feel what it is to be invisible. Mordare nodded, a glint of approval in his eyes. So be it. As the guards led Vespera and Seduce away, Seduce looked at me one last time. There was no more hatred in her eyes, only confusion, as if she couldn't understand how the library mouse had become the most powerful woman in the kingdom. I didn't explain. Some people would never understand. The trial ended at dusk. The hall emptied slowly, lords and ladies whispering about the day's events, about the king's new counselor, about the uncertain and exciting future that lay ahead. Mordare met me in the library. Of course it would be in the library. It was where everything had begun, after all, where I had corrected the maps without knowing he was watching, where my mind had caught a king's attention. You were magnanimous, he said, sitting beside me by the window. More than they deserved. Revenge would not bring me peace. I looked out at the gardens below, where the first spring flowers were beginning to emerge. Just more weight to carry. That is why you will be a great queen. My heart stopped. I turned to him. Mordare was watching me with that intensity I had learned to recognize as love disguised as analysis. Queen? You saved my life. You saved my kingdom. You proved more valuable than all the lords and strategists who surround me." He stood up, offering me his hand. "I won't ask your father. He forfeited that right. I will ask you directly." I took his hand, letting him raise me up. My strategist, my savior, my equal. His leaden eyes shone with a light I had never seen before. "Will you agree to rule this mess with me?" I should have hesitated. I should have thought about the implications, the difficulties, the enemies that still existed. But looking at Mordair, feeling the warmth of his hands in mine, remembering everything we had gone through to get there was only one possible answer. Yes. The wedding took place in the Winter Gardens, a month later. I wore blue and silver, the colors Mordair had chosen for me from the start. My hair was loose for the first time in years, coppery curls falling over my shoulders like liquid fire. Saritha was not there. Vespera was not there. My father was not there. But Archivist Morna was. Sage Orion was. Beta Cade was, smiling for the first time since I had known him. And Mordair. Mordair was there, waiting for me at the makeshift altar, his eyes never leaving mine as I walked toward him. When our hands joined, when the vows were exchanged, when he kissed me before the entire kingdom, I knew I had finally found my place, not in the shadows, not in invisibility, in the light, beside the man who had looked beyond appearances and seen my soul. 3 years later, I founded the first Royal Academy for Women, a place where brilliant minds could flourish, regardless of birth or status, where girls like I had been could discover their worth before spending decades hiding it. Mordair supported me every step of the way. He always supported me. And every night, when we met in the royal library to discuss strategies and plans, he called me by the nickname only he used, my brilliant mouse. And I smiled, remembering how much those words had been used to hurt me. Now they were a symbol of everything I had conquered. They said I wasn't his type. They were right. He wasn't looking for a type. He was looking for an equal. And in the library, between maps and dust, we drew our own destiny. Thank you for being here and for joining me for another story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you want, leave your comment. I love reading what you feel and think after each episode. Thank you for the love, and see you in the next story.